Okay, welcome everyone. We're on the Adirondack SUNY Washington County site for our committee meeting. And I think Dr. Duffy has some encouraging words for us all. We're looking ahead. So Chris, I'm going to call this meeting to order and turn it right over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Appreciate the time. We have a few updates to provide you, and I thought this would just be a good opportunity to share some of our strategic planning thinking, update you on where we are with budget, particularly in light of the state budget being passed on Tuesday, as well as an update on where we are with our COVID response and our fall planning. I have invited a few of the members of my team, and if I just could ask them to introduce themselves and their role, just in case you don't know them. So John.
Good afternoon. I'm John Jablonski, Vice President for Academic Affairs.
Marie.
Hi, good afternoon. Anne-Marie Scheidegger. I'm the college's Vice President for Administrative Services and Treasurer.
Great. And Rob, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rob Palmieri. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment and Student Affairs.
Great. So is it okay? Well, do I have permission to share my screen? I'm gonna give it a shot here. Oops. May I get that?
You do have permission. I'm not sure how to do it. I'm in Delaware.
There we go. No, I got it. Thank you. Yep. So as I said, we've been in the process, and I think a few of you joined us back in November for our Investor Summit, where we were also inviting external community members to weigh in on some of the ideas and thoughts that the college should take into consideration as we develop our next strategic plan. Believe it or not, we'll be coming into our 60th year next year, which is really exciting. And you know, we continue to focus on the fact that our communities need us, and now is the time to really build on our successes and keep the college moving forward, even during these most extraordinary times. In fact, you know, about a year ago, we were debating, should we even talk about a strategic plan in a time when we're just trying to manage a crisis? And we all felt that this is probably the best time to do it, to really be able to get ourselves to be forward thinking, knowing that, you know, COVID will not last forever, even though it feels that way some days. And that, you know, the college will be here no matter what. And we want to make sure that we take what we've learned, even pre-COVID, but also during the last year, in having to really reinvent in many ways the ways in which we deliver our education and what lessons we learned out of that can help us in thinking about the Adirondack of the future. There's a lot we could talk about. I wanted to just very briefly highlight a few accomplishments since the last strategic plan was launched in 2018, and just briefly go through a few things that we're proud of being able to make good progress in a variety of areas. So we've secured many major grants, not only since 2018, but really since about 2014. And a lot of that grant work is around supporting our neediest students and developing support systems to attend to not only a student's academic needs, but also the needs of our students that continue to become barriers for students, those things outside of the class and in their day-to-day lives. And so being able to stand up new programs, you'll see the acronyms here. We all have a lot of alphabet soup when it comes to our industry, but programs EOP, which is the Educational Opportunity Program, HPOG, which is a program specifically supporting health professions and students in nursing and other health profession training programs. And then our most recent grant is called TRIO, which is a federal grant through the U.S. Department of Education. And that's another opportunity to provide what we sometimes call wraparound services for students to be able to help them succeed in college. So a lot of investment, and we're starting to see those things pay off in terms of completion rates, which I'll show you in a minute. Our English division really spent a lot of time redesigning the way in which we support those who need additional work in their English skills, reading and writing skills, coming into college and while they're in college. and redesigned, which is not an easy thing to do when you talk about long-standing traditions of how you think about the ways in which students enter college and move through academic coursework, but redesigning the way in which we support English remediation. The old way was you come in, you test, you start in a course that may or may not have credit towards your degree, but required in order to bolster your skills. And if you get through that course, then you move on to maybe sometimes a second course, and then maybe you enter a credit-bearing course. The data is pretty clear. The students that actually make it to that credit-bearing course and beyond is small. And that's not just at Adirondack, it's across the nation. And so there's been a lot of discussion about how to rethink how to still get the students the skills. It doesn't take away the fact that they need the skills, but are there different ways that move students along in a more accelerated fashion and also actually achieve the outcomes? And I'm happy to report we've adopted what's called the Accelerated Learning Program, which was a model program out of the Community College of Baltimore, where students are simultaneously taking their remedial needs alongside their credit-bearing English course. And the results so far are very promising. So really proud of our English faculty for being able to think differently about, things that have been kind of standard structures for a very long time. Our Finish in 2 program was a program designed intentionally to focus on students who could complete, so really on the opposite end of the spectrum, those students who are very capable of moving through college courses at what we might call, and we've maybe called in the past, the normal pace in 2 years. And sometimes we got away from that. Just students were just moving along, and for a lot of reasons, students take longer in their degree, not only at an associate level but at a baccalaureate level as well. But the students that are capable, let's get them in, let them finish in 2 years, and move them on. And so we've had great success in a program called Finish in 2, and then another grant program, a large U.S. Department of Education grant that's really giving us 5 years of funding to redesign our whole first year experience. So how we onboard students into college, but most importantly, not just the first semester, but the entire first year, how do we ensure that those students have the supports they need to persist, while also looking at all of our business processes and streamlining and automating many things that unfortunately are still paper driven, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. Of course, COVID has made us accelerate that a little bit more, which is not a bad thing. Things that we said, oh, we could never do that, and now we've been able to do, and that's a good thing. Of course, you all know Adirondack Hall, which thanks to your support and Warren County's support, we were able to build our beautiful new science and nursing building. And Brian, I can't see you on my screen, but I know we've had this conversation many times, and I'm happy to report that our nursing enrollment has actually increased year over year, fall 19 to fall 20 by 18%, and over 5 years by 12%. So, what we had kind of made a bet on, like if we can enhance our nursing facilities, will it actually make a difference in enrollment? And I'm happy to report that it has, and we anticipate that continuing. In fact, I just was reading a quick article in the Albany Business Review you may have seen about, which is no big surprise, the expected very large shortage in nurses in the coming years and how SUNY Adirondack can play a role in that. We've also increased our attention to workforce development and small business support, also housed in Adirondack Hall. We made a lot of investments in technology, which of course all of us are doing. And of course, thankfully, that was the case even pre-COVID, so that we were a little more prepared to offer some of our services in a digital format. We've started new programs. Some of the highlights, our mechatronics program, which again was born out of conversations with our local manufacturers, our Journey Worker Technical Trades Management degree, which is a support for those who go through Journey Worker programs, who we will grant credit for that experience up to 30 credits, and then they have another 30 credits to earn an associate degree, particularly focused on running a business, which we know many people in the trades, they learn their trade and they generally are going to start a business at some point, so we think there's real value. That's just kicking off. Our agricultural business program, which you're very aware of, and we've had momentum and increase in enrollment there. Physical education, very popular program, as well as the fine arts. Our early college, our college and the high school programs have been our largest source of growth over the past 5 to 6 years, a lot of attention and effort in that area. early college, meaning, and I know Dana, you're aware of this, that a student starts in their junior year in one of our 4 career academies, earning college credit and high school credit simultaneously, earning up to 30 college credits when they graduate from high school, and in all cases, earning some type of industry recognized credential. And then, of course, the traditional way is offering college courses in the high school, where high school instructors are deemed qualified as our adjuncts, and they teach our courses in the high schools. And I just highlighted here a few of the high schools that we're working specifically in Washington County. Of course, fiscal stability. We've had a lot of conversations with some of you on this call, probably more than others, but in general about, of course, maintaining a strong fiscal health. And as you know, and through the great work of Anne-Marie and her team, we developed a long-term financial plan several years ago that highlighted ways in which we could continue to manage our expenses, increase our revenue during times where we knew the demographics were not in our favor in terms of what we might call traditional age students. A lot of different actions are packed into these bulleted items, but just as a high level, done a great job of managing our benefits. That's been a huge savings for us while still being able to maintain high quality benefits for our employees. This year in particular, we did take action to reduce some of our faculty and staff. We've done that through, sometimes we've been managing it through attrition over the past several years. This year, we needed to take a little bit more of a proactive approach, and unfortunately making some hard decisions, but those that we think are smart and well-intentioned in terms of looking at our data and right-sizing our faculty and staff based on enrollment. We are, I'm happy to report, we're making some good progress in shared services. I know that sometimes at the county level, that feels like a frustrating word, because I know that's been on your radar for many years, but we're also taking an approach of looking at how we can partner with other colleges and really focusing on those back end types of administrative work that maybe doesn't really have to be done on our campus. And of course, learning this new remote work world has opened our eyes to even more opportunities. But most recently, we've signed an agreement to partner with Onondaga Community College, Herkimer, and Cayuga Community College to enter into a shared service center that will support our institutional research and reporting functions, things that all of us have the same reporting requirements, whether they be state or federal. So why not pool our resources to be able to accommodate some of those routine areas that we're required to do, so that we can either free up staff on our own campus to attend to real research, or potentially not have to replace administrative positions, which for us, this we believe will actually accomplish both of those things. The second shared service that we've just recently done is we're sharing a programmer. We're sharing a IT programmer with Schenectady Community College and Corning Community College. So we get a third of the programmer's time. The programmer doesn't work on our campus, but again, the work is pretty similar and we're able to work through that. So more of those to come as we really focus on what do we have to keep locally, in other words, instruction and student support services and the things that really need to stay here, and how can we streamline some of our administrative functions to continue to manage our fiscal fiscal health. We've looked at classroom utilization. We've, through John's area and through the faculty's work, they've done a great job of really understanding course taking patterns, modifying our course schedule to accommodate enrollment, and ultimately reducing the amount of spend we have in instruction while not reducing quality. That's been a big project. We've made some really good progress there. We also made some hard decisions to sunset some programs that were just not meeting enrollment goals, and over time. It wasn't just COVID, but COVID sort of put us to the point of we needed to make a decision sooner than later. So we've made some hard decisions to begin to move along some programs that haven't been thriving, so that we could ultimately invest in programs that we believe will thrive, or potentially starting programs to meet community needs. And then finally, probably the most important initiative is to be able to not just, we can't cut our way out of, some fiscal challenges. We also have to grow, and we have to look at our enrollment in different ways, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. So some just high level accomplishments that we're pretty proud of. And of course, we could probably spend a whole conversation around what's a 2-year graduation rate versus a 4-year or 3-year, and how come it's so low? And there's lots of reasons. However, this is a benchmark that's used across the nation. It's used by the federal government to determine success. And we all know that success, of course, comes in many shapes and sizes. But for us to be able to make progress in our 2-year graduation rate, in other words, looking at a cohort of students who enter in one fall, what percentage of those students persist and complete their degree in 2 years and 3 years. And as you can see here, SUNY Adirondack is the blue line. And back in 2011, we were quite low, as you can see. The things I mentioned earlier, Finish in 2 and all the different support services that we put around students, we went from there to 20%, and we're now above our peers. This is a big jump. I mean, that's a very large percentage increase over a period of time. And that was not a small feat. It's everyone involved across campus, but something that we'll continue to focus on, but very proud of. The national average for the 2-year graduation rate is somewhere in the 12 or 13%, Rob, does that sound about right? So we're still ahead of the national average, and we're ahead of our peers in SUNY. So good progress there. Same trajectory when it comes to the 3-year graduation rate. As you can see, we now have surpassed our peers and are actually quite a bit ahead of them from a percentage standpoint in our 3-year graduation rate. So, not every student comes here to graduate. Not every student intends to graduate. Many students transfer before they graduate, but we still want to focus on those who do want to graduate, and we want to move them closer to their finish line so they can move on in their lives. And we're proud of the great momentum that we've achieved over the past several years. So as we look forward and we set our eyes on the next strategic plan that we'll launch this fall, and we're at this point, our working title is Adirondack 2025, Building a Strong Tomorrow. And just to reinforce what we value as an institution and as a college community, in our last strategic plan, we spent quite a bit of time really interrogating ourselves on what is it that we value as an institution, that no matter what happens, we will always stay true to those values. And those I just highlighted here on the screen for you. We strongly value lifelong learning, the fact that, a community college isn't just a one-stop for one learning. It can be people coming in and out. I know you probably, if not yourself or your family, people who may have started with us, they take one degree, maybe they come back for a continuing education course. So that's something we really value, and we want to continue to make sure our infrastructure and our learning environment supports that. Thriving communities. We're a community college. We want to make sure that it's very explicit that we value our community and we value the communities that we serve. And then finally, the mission that really community colleges were founded on, we do not want to stray from, and that's open access. The idea that anyone that wants to participate in higher education should have that opportunity, and we'll do everything we can to help to support their success. So with those values in mind, and a lot of input that we took from our campus community, our stakeholders, such as yourselves, other external stakeholders, we came up with 4 goals that we consider to be our high-level, important institutional goals to focus on over the next couple of years that will really help to inform and to drive our operational objectives. We still do our daily work. We still teach and we still support and all the good things that a college does, but what are the things we want to focus on over the next several years? So these are the draft goals that we've developed. Developing innovative programs and services, expanding enrollment, champion student success, and strengthening our organizational capacity. And for each goal, we've just identified a very brief description of what we believe to fall within those goals that will again help inform some of our strategic initiatives over the next couple of years, including our financial investment. So, a lot that we learned from COVID, we want to maintain. We learned that, not that we didn't know, we knew that our students had multiple life challenges and complex lives, but COVID certainly illuminated the need to ensure that our course offerings, our programs remain flexible and can appeal to multiple learners. Not everyone disliked virtual learning. In fact, I was with a group of students yesterday, and they said, I never thought that I would like remote learning, but I've learned to like it more than I thought. Yes, there are things I'd like to go back to and do in person, but I really do like the flexibility. I mean, we know we have students that have families that they're raising. We have, students, particularly in our rural areas where transportation is a real issue. And if they can log into their class from home, that's a real benefit. It keeps them in college. So how do we enhance our program offerings, our services to support the diverse learners that we have, and how to continue to be innovative? The innovative things we had to do this last year, let's keep that momentum going, how we can use technology and flexible scheduling and delivery methods. The second goal is around expanding enrollment. We will not be fiscally strong if we don't improve enrollment. We know that. That's what drives revenue and brings people to our college. So we want to seek new student populations so that we can expand both credit and non-credit enrollment and invest in completion strategies that ensure and create equitable outcomes. Sometimes when we talk about enrollment, and this is traditional across higher education, we tend to focus mostly on that credit seeking, degree seeking student. And yet in our non-credit area, and someday we'll come up with a better word than non-credit because it sounds as if it's lesser, and it's really not, it's just different. What can we do to ensure that that is bolstered? And what we know is that in higher education, there's becoming a lot more focus on the short-term training types of programs, upskilling for the workforce that really has been sitting in non-credit enrollment. And how do we bolster that and think about enrollment broader than just the traditional, I come and take these courses and earn a degree. So lots of work is happening already, and particularly in John's team on this. And we want to really continue to focus on ways to bolster both our credit and non-credit enrollment. Championing student success. What do students do when they leave us, and how do we ensure that we're making the right connections for them? So how do we create deeper partnerships with our employers as well as other higher education institutions so that our students leave whatever their goal is, whether to enter employment right away, transfer and enter employment? How do we ensure that they're getting the support they need to be prepared? And what does prepared look like? And this is kind of a nod to a lot of what we hear from employers is, yes, I'm interested in their skills, the things they're gaining, but I'm also interested in what we might have called soft skills, but now we kind of say they're essential skills. How do we help them, show up to work on time and good work ethic and really understand the professional responsibilities of working a job? And so continuing to look at ways that we can create that type of learning environment for our students. And then finally, internally, how do we continue to focus on our own organization and increasing the diversity of our employees to make sure our employees look like the students that we serve? Improve our investments in employee development, and continue back to that point I was making earlier. How do we streamline administrative work to ensure that our resources are best spent on the things that we have to do and should be doing here on campus in one form or another? But if we don't have a strong employee base, all of this sort of falls apart. So we really see it as an interrelationship, that how we support our employees is equally important as how we support our students. So I know that was a lot to throw at you. I'm going to take a breath here and see if there are any questions about, or comments or thoughts, feedback on what you've seen so far. It's always hard on Zoom because I can only see like 6 faces here. But
Hi, Chris. Brian Campbell.
oh, hi, Brian.
I liked everything I heard. The question is just how does everything tie as we try to get back to normalcy? My concern is, how is this stimulus and all that one-time money get utilized in a way that over time has the most bang for the buck, so to speak, and
Yep,
put us back on our path to our everyday work that we're trying to get done? I guess that's my biggest question, but I like your long-term strategy here.
Thanks, Brian. We're going to get to that. So good question. You queued me up. Any other thoughts before we move on? From my team, anything that I missed that you think we should be highlighting?
I think, Chris, I think Bob Hankey's wants
Okay.
to ask a
Yeah,
question.
go ahead.
Thank you.
Well, one of your slides said to seek new student populations. What specifically are you thinking about there?
So not only reinforcing the, we won't stop recruiting in our high schools. Those are really important populations to us. One thing we're doing, I think, probably more intentionally is how do we recruit more of the students that are taking our courses in their high school to get them to actually enroll in the college. Historically and even nationally, students that take college courses in the high school at their local community college sometimes don't end up enrolling there, and we're okay with that. We expect that. We consider that to be a service to the community, but we might needed to be more intentional about bringing those students on. Like, look, you've already got credits towards a degree, so that's one population. We're doing this work in Qatar where we're bringing our education internationally. That's another new population. We were approved to work with the Washington Correctional Facility on providing education for incarcerated individuals. So those are new populations. Continuing our focus on how to bring back the person that's, what we've been calling sort of the adult learner, but those that have some degree but not completed a degree. And that's an area that Rob's team has been working really hard on developing some more scholarships for students. What we find is, that working adult, it's just not easy to stop everything and come back to school. And all of this ties together, Bob, because the more flexible our course offerings are, again, kind of learning from COVID that, maybe having to come to campus 3 days a week isn't always necessary. And if we can create some more flexible learning offerings, we have a better shot of being able to attract and retain particularly the working adult, the busy adult, to be able to come back to school. So that's a real focus. And it's not just about marketing, it's about your product. I mean, for those who are marketing gurus, what's your product and does it appeal to the particular population? If we're expecting a working adult student to quit their job and come to us full-time in the day, then we will not win on that. So it's a combination of looking at some other populations to help offset some of the losses that we're seeing, particularly in our young student population based on demographics, and then rethinking the way in which we deliver our education so that we can attract those working adults to come back to school.
That might relate to the non-credit.
Yep, it could.
posting also.
Absolutely. And then how do we take the learning that's happening in non-credit, and translate that to credit? Because many times there is a good transition there. And for some students, they get their foot in the door, they get a little bit of taste of education, and maybe it's only in a 6-week program. And then all of a sudden they're like, wow, I can be a college student. And we've seen that happen particularly in some of our shorter term health training programs, like our CNA program, where you only have to commit 10 to 12 weeks. And then all of a sudden they're like, you know what, I think I'm going to pursue a nursing degree. So we see the real opportunity. We've been calling it sort of bridging that gap, bridge from non-credit to credit so that we can keep people engaged and continuing to move up their career ladder. All right, well, I'll switch gears if you don't mind and just talk a little bit. I know everyone, we talk about COVID every day. I know we're all a little tired of it, but I wanted to just highlight some successes here at the college. Since the beginning of the fall semester, we've conducted over 10,000 tests on campus. We test now weekly. We test all of our in-person students and our in-person employees. And from those tests, it's probably a couple days old. I think we're at 38 cases, but 35, 38 cases only in the entire year. And if you think about college campuses and the worry that many of us had, us included, on bringing people back in person, what would that look like? I'd say we've had a very successful semester. We put a lot of protocols in place, and we've been pretty strict on many of those protocols and keeping them. And it's paid off. So we're 6 weeks away from the end of the semester. So I knock on wood every time we say these things because the shoe can drop. And of course, we are seeing a bit of an increase in both of our counties right now, but so far so good. We've been successful in being able to at least accommodate a percentage of our classes in person for those hands-on types of experiences, and we're glad that we've been able to do that. We are holding a commencement that's going to have an in-person component, which we're really excited about. I can't think of a student population that deserves more to have at least the opportunity to be in person if they so choose than this. You know, these students have had 3 semesters of COVID learning, and I can't wait to be able to celebrate with them, even though it'll be at a distance with a mask on, for those that attend graduation on May 15th. However, that will mean that we will have a reduced platform party, and we will be minimizing who is going to be attending in person. And so, Sue, we'll talk to you at another point soon about maybe recording a greeting on behalf of the county. We are still moving forward with our annual county graduate awards. So we've called out for some nominees, and we'll be sending those over to you as soon as we get those. So we still want you to be involved, but unfortunately we want to be able to maintain the space mostly for students with a smaller number on the platform. And then for fall 21, we're eagerly and hopeful in being able to return primarily, I said return primarily remote. That's wrong. We're primarily in person. Reverse that. But making sure that we also preserve some of our mixed options in our high demand classes. And what we mean by that is those general education courses that we have many sections, we want to provide in person, we want to provide some remote options, and then some hybrid options. Again, kind of taking lessons learned from COVID to be able to provide those flexible offerings. Protocols for fall, who knows? You know, each day it seems to change, each hour, we won't know yet, but at this point we're planning to be mostly in person in the fall, and we'll plan accordingly. And we're hopeful that, you know, vaccinations will continue to rise and that we'll find ourselves in a good place for fall. Any questions on that? State budget, and I'll turn to Anne-Marie to check my facts, but as you know, it was passed on Tuesday and we're still getting some of the final details. But at this point, certainly better news than we expected even a month ago. So where we landed for community college funding is the legislature actually did acknowledge the floor. If you remember, we've been talking about, you know, this idea of a funding formula from the state that took into account the enrollment fluctuations, in particular at community colleges, and at least determined that each year we can count on a floor, some dollar amount that we could count on from year to year for the most part for our funding. Since if enrollment goes down, our operating costs don't necessarily go down with us, as you know, fixed costs stay about the same. So the good news is the legislature acknowledged that, the governor's budget did not. And they've put in the budget that we would get 98% of the floor, which would be 98% of the enacted amount from this past year. That's good progress. It doesn't necessarily mean a windfall for us. Unfortunately, it still means a reduction in aid, but a much smaller reduction in aid than what we were anticipating a month ago. They also did put in the funding formula a $50 increase per FTE. So for those colleges where enrollment might be better than the floor, it would be the greater of the two that a college could account for in their budget. Did I get that right, Anne-Marie? Yep. So good news for community colleges, because the acknowledgement of the floor has been something we've been advocating for 4 years now. At least it's in there, and now we can work towards 100% in the future, and potentially even getting that written into legislation so that we're not so subject to this volume-based funding formula, which no one else has. So good news there. TAP, the maximum TAP award, was increased by $500, which is the first increase in TAP in at least a decade, if not longer. So that's really good news for students. There are some other items related to higher education, particularly focused on some of the support programs for community colleges. And so we're feeling pretty good about it compared to where we felt, you know, even like I said, even last week to some point, we were still making frantic phone calls to our representatives about supporting community colleges. Unfortunately, community colleges still experience a decline in state investment by 4%, which is, you know, always disheartening, but as I said, it's better than where we were a little while ago, and it's a place to start from, considering all the turmoil that all of us have experienced, and the state included. So our next steps is we're getting our budget kind of recalibrated based on this information so that we can continue to move forward with bringing forward our budget to our Board of Trustees and then to the counties in the next couple months. But before we go on with anything more in the budget, I want to go back to the stimulus fund. So back to Brian's point. There's a lot packed in here too, of course, but as you know, there have been now 3 rounds of stimulus funds. The first was the CARES Act last spring, which did support, bring money to us in the tune of about $2.7 million. Half of that went to students, half went to the institution. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all. Those monies have all been expended based on the requirements that were provided to us from both the Department of Education and the state. And so students did get direct aid, which was really important to us, of course. And we also were able to use the funds to allocate towards expenses related to COVID. The next round in December, what we're calling the Sarissa funds, is another round of funding to higher education. Again, one portion of that funding goes directly to students, the rest comes to the institution. At this point, we've only received kind of the green light and guidance on how to spend the student money. And we just got that a couple weeks ago. Rob and Anne-Marie's team are furiously working on getting money back to students. We're, you know, more than halfway through the semester. We still have students that are suffering because of COVID and the environment. So we want to make sure we get those the money that they need. And the highest priority is our low-income students, those who receive Pell, which is the federal program for low-income students. So that money will be in their hands in the next week to 2 weeks. And but we're still waiting guidance on how we can spend the institutional portion of those funds, as well as then this third round that was just passed, the American Rescue Plan, which is another very substantial amount of money coming to college, which we're thrilled about, of course. But to your point, Brian, just like you're experiencing, it's one-time money. It can only be spent on certain things. So what we're doing is starting to kind of generate what we think will be allowable expenses. Of course, the obvious ones are things like the increased expense to having to do COVID-19 testing on a regular basis, all the safety protocols that we've had to put in place, staffing around that. That's kind of the easy stuff. The other things will be things like how can we enhance our technology? And that's to your point, Brian. What we're trying to think about is what's the new learning environment going to be not only this fall, but going forward, and how can we utilize and leverage these funds to scale up our infrastructure, which wasn't necessarily as great as it should have been, and now we've learned. So things like how can we equip each classroom so that you could easily pivot to some sort of remote environment or video a class where someone could log into the class and be able to view it. All the equipment that needs to go with that and the infrastructure, we believe will be able to be covered by these funds. And so we're out, our IT team is out evaluating every single classroom, talking with faculty about, what would make your classroom even more high tech and more flexible, and then accommodating those requests as we can. Those are the big ones. Some of the nuances, we're still not clear on. We think we can account for lost revenue for enrollment. We think we're going to be able to accommodate some other needs, but we're just not quite sure. And we are subject to the Division of Budget has the authority to determine our plan. So we're kind of at the mercy of the state right now and SUNY in helping us to determine how we can spend those monies. We do have a little bit of time. The Sarissa money, we think we have about a year. And then the most recent round of stimulus funds, we have 2 years, we think. That's the latest information. Imri, anything that you want to add to that or correct to make sure I got it right?
No, you did a great job. Just as I'm sure it is for the county as well, any allocation of these funds needs to be approved by our external independent auditors. They'll have to use the federal guidelines to audit, just as I'm sure any funds you receive will be audited by yours as well.
Any questions, Brian?
Yeah, so I guess my biggest one would be, you didn't mention the IT, Zoom infrastructure and all that, because that's all directly
Yep.
COVID related, but
Yep.
even if you upgrade in case it comes again, I mean, you could, I think there's a lot you could put into that that will help your curriculum going forward, but still be a COVID cost. And
Yep.
that's my point with our money. If there's a way we can help us for 10 to 20 years down the road, I think that's where we kind of need to focus, because anything that's easy come, easy go doesn't do you a heck of a lot of good long term.
Right. Yeah, it's not, and as you all live, and it would be great to start hiring people with that money. That's not a good use of the money, and it's not going to be helpful. So we really are focused on infrastructure, and infrastructure being a pretty wide definition. But to your point, Brian, those are exactly the things that we're focused on. And also, how do we equip our offices to allow for the flexibility of remote work and remote services? Again, it goes back to what our students need. That, do they have to really come in and meet in person with an advisor or a counselor? Can they do it in a remote environment? We've been doing it for the past year. So we don't want to throw out that option for people. Just like meetings. I mean, I'm sure you're experiencing, at least we are, that even though we're all tired of seeing people in boxes, it has increased attendance in many meetings because it's just more convenient. So what are the things that we want to continue to provide the flexibility? And yes, I think, if Mary Hand, our CIO, was here, she'd say, I could spend all that money tomorrow. Because as we know, IT infrastructure is not cheap. We have to worry about security, which we're all, very concerned. This environment has certainly heightened the awareness of cyber attacks and the things that go with that. It's not fun stuff to spend your money on, but being able to bolster up our infrastructure is going to be a big part of it. Absolutely. So that was what I wanted to share with you. And again, I'd look at my team, anything that we want to make sure our county partners are aware of. And the only other item that we would like as a request, that's no money. So one of the things that as we continue to look at ways to market the college, it became apparent to us that maybe our counties would be willing to maybe bolster where it's appropriate, where it works for you on your county website, just the fact that there is a community college and a direct link to it, and any sort of ways in which you can use your marketing channels to promote the college, we would appreciate. So we did work a little bit with Warren County. They were able to find different spots on their website that could highlight the college, and we just wondered if that was an opportunity or potential with Washington County, and if so, Rob Palmieri would be the person that could work with you and whomever on your team to brainstorm ways. Of course, every county is a little different in terms of what they have available to them, but we don't think it'll cost any money, and so we're looking for a free ask. And that every student we keep in our counties, the better off we all are. So we look at this as an opportunity to collaborate.
Dr. Duffy, I think that's a great idea personally. I think that the websites and the internet access is so important. So to share marketing is something that would have to go through. I think Sam's on here, is Terry on here, and would have to go through committee. Melissa, maybe you can give us some guidelines.
Well, we haven't, kind of unprecedented. We have not done this before, but I would certainly sit down with Terry, probably if the supervisors agree, I think it probably would go to the IT committee, and we would find the best spot on the website to put maybe a little blurb about the college. And then I think a link is the best way to go. So there's no updating or anything on our part that we would have to do.
Yep, that's exactly what I think, Rob, right? That's what really Warren.
Yeah, that's what we did with Warren. That'd be great.
Yeah, as a sponsor, we wouldn't have any conflicts with doing that. Obviously, we can't open our website to everybody and their brother, but we have a special relationship with Adirondack that we don't have with every other college in the world. So it's not a problem to put in whatever we can do to help them do that, because, you know, if others came to us, we'd say this because of that special relationship that we're affording them this opportunity. So normally, you know, we have to think about those kind of things, but in this case, because they're not us, but they're darn near are, just like a lot of other organizations. That shouldn't be a problem for us to do that. And I don't know, as we want to get into the business of content, their content, I guess, is my point.
Right.
So other than, you know, saying it's okay, so Terry has some backup for that. I don't really know what role the committee would play in it, other than to say, go ahead and work with Terry to make that happen.
Thank you.
Again, subject to Terry and the cybersecurity people, because that's near and dear to my heart since they're under me. But I can't see, you know, putting links and things like that are going to get us into too much trouble.
So
Thank you.
And in kind, you know, we have Washington County on our website as well under our about. So.
Rob, if I could suggest, if you would like to send me what it is that you gave to Warren County to put on their website, that way I could present that to Terry and maybe we could go from there.
Sure.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the college get our job listings?
I don't know. We have our career connections coordinator, Brandon Aldis, who works with organizations. That's something that we, you know, definitely have done more of with the county. So we'd be happy to post any government jobs that become available. So
because we're churning out notices all the time.
yeah, maybe Rob, in your work with Melissa, we could make that connection too.
I know we have sent some
Yeah.
there in the past. I don't know if we send everyone.
Mhm.
So we could revisit that.
Sure.
Okay.
And even, you know, goes vice versa, right? Instead of having to worry about sending it, if we just put a link on our site, you know, like, so that it just links to yours, you're not worried about, oh, you know, I forgot to send that to SUNY Adirondack. So I'm sure we could work something out. Great.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Civil service is a mystery to people that don't have a relative in the system
Mhm.
or have some connection to figure out how it works. So the average person on the street has no idea how to get a job with us.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can tell you that from experience. So anything we can do to make those opportunities available so they'll at least look at us is going to help us
Well,
and you.
Yeah, and you know, we could even do some special information sessions about how do you get a civil service job? Like most students, you know, especially early in their career, they might not even know what civil service is, you know, as to your point. So we could maybe also think about ways we can just educate our students on different opportunities. They may not think of government as a job, and yet, of course, we all know they're very good jobs and can be a great career opportunity.
Some days it's quite the job.
That's true. Dana, I saw your question in the chat, and yes, we are. In fact, Rob, could you just describe briefly our open Zoom rooms and what that means? Supervisor Hogan was putting in the chat about, are we doing virtual information sessions for students around the state? And I think our open Zooms and our virtual infos are probably what he's thinking about, but can you just describe those?
Sure. So I think similar, like we're open for business physically, but I think the open Zoom room concept is the same thing, where we're anytime, it's very flexible. If a student wants to check in with us, through the internet, we're open to meet with them. And I think one of the benefits, I think, of this crisis was to, instead of potentially pushing a student from one office to the next, we actually ask what their needs are and we help them on the spot. And so we have, anything with admissions or in recruitment, financial aid, and advisement, so we can actually really help the student where they're at. So it actually is something that we implemented a couple of months ago, and we're expanding it. And I think we're definitely going to keep it even with the new normal that we're in, because it is there for students. So even if they couldn't make it, working adult, instead of coming to campus, you can easily just log in onto the Zoom room, open Zoom.
It's kind of like open office hours, and it's right on the homepage of our website. So if a student is searching like, hey, I want to come to college, they can see right from there that they can just pop into a Zoom and someone is there to help them. And that's a great opportunity for anyone, not only around the state, but just locally that just needs that flexibility. They don't have to get in a car. They don't have to drive to campus. They can still get the service they need. Is that what you were thinking about, Dana? Oh.
No, but that was even better. I was just talking about a virtual tour of the campus because I think the campus is one of the prettiest community college campuses in the state of New York. I've always said I think it is it's in a great setting.
Yep.
That's even better.
Yes,
just what Rob was explaining.
Yep.
It's really interesting.
Virtual tour as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to be
okay.
The virtual we've done, and which I think, but we're going to be expanding our on-campus tours, obviously with safety protocols, throughout the end of spring here and into the summer. So, but yeah, those have been pretty popular.
Yep. So that's what's going on at the college. We appreciate your time and your support, but don't want to hold you up, but certainly here to answer any other questions that you might have.
Yeah, Chris, where do you now see fall? Are you starting to look at it differently than you were? I mean, is there anything to gauge that with at this point in time? I mean, it's not May yet, but May's coming pretty quick.
So here's some of the good news coming. We rolled out our summer schedule about a month ago or so, and we're doing very well in summer enrollment compared year to year, which is really good to see. Fall enrollment is still slow. We're making progress. The decline in applications, the percentage is getting smaller, but it's slow. Rob's team, John's team, everyone is doing everything they can to get students engaged, but students are just slow in making decisions. We're hearing that across our peers. And some of it we think is access to their guidance counselors. It's just a different world, right? Not every school is in person. Some they're in person one day, they're virtual the next day. And so that connection is not quite as strong as it normally would be. We're seeing a little bit of that. Where we saw the biggest drop of students, and in fact, just did a little analysis to look by county, Washington, Warren, and Saratoga, what the differences were between just looking 19 to 20. And where we lost the most students across the board are students from low-income backgrounds, the students that are typically hit the hardest by these types of crises. Of course, we haven't had a million pandemics, so I can't say that, but for those that, have lost their jobs or, were already on the margins, they just didn't come to higher education. And that's where we saw the biggest drop, a very large drop in Washington County. So it's going to take a lot of work to get them to re-engage and trust that they can come back to school. So the good news is with that, we have a lot of financial resources, and part of the stimulus funds we think we can use to try to help more students re-engage with college. That's an area that we're hoping to get a little more clarity on. But for those students who disengaged even back in March of 20 and have not resurfaced, how can we get them back to school? And for some, virtual learning turned them off. They didn't like it. They couldn't do it. And we all know broadband is still a problem in some of our communities. And it may be that they have broadband, but it's not strong enough. Or if you have 4 people in your house that are all hitting broadband at the same time, it's a slow connection. And so it made virtual learning for some students nearly impossible, regardless of the laptops that we loaned out and the MiFis and everything that we tried to do. But we're scaling up those resources to try to bring those people back to school. And you know what, Brian, I mean, I wish I could say, yep, we're doing great. We've got some work ahead of us. Hopefully it will be, we think there might be a surge as we get further in the summer and people become more comfortable with the idea of, you can come back in person if that's what you choose to do. So
Well, that's kind of what I was referring to. I would expect a surge too, and I would expect people that had originally been, oh, I'm gonna go away to school saying, you know what? I've been home. I like it here. This is the area where I grew up. Maybe this is where I want to go to school and don't really want to leave the area now. And because as far as our region, we didn't get hit as COVID as bad as a lot of other regions. And so I gotta believe that we would see it come back. I just didn't know if there's a direct link to maybe hit the high schools a little harder, saying, hey, we really want you there this fall. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a way you can do that or if you're already trying that or what, but I'm just thinking that there should be a lot more candidates, I would think, this year than there was last.
Yep, Rob's team is on it. They're in constant contact with the high schools. We've done instant admit days virtually so that students can just meet with one of our access advisors and apply and be accepted on the spot. So yeah, we're definitely in touch with the schools and we'll continue to do so. Dana put in another good question about whether online certification programs like Coursera and Google, et cetera, have had an impact on enrollment. It's a really good question. We don't know that for sure for Adirondack. We do know that there are a lot more people in the higher ed space than there were several years ago. And those that were already providing online education was about the only sector of education that actually grew this year. So I wouldn't be surprised. It's hard for us to hone in on that too much because there's no way to track that data. Like it's not like it gets reported in a particular database that we can see. But anecdotally, we do believe that for especially those working adult students that may have maybe in the past thought, well, I'll come back and get a degree or a certificate, they are selecting these other options that are out there, and there's a lot of them. So something that SUNY is very tuned into and trying to rethink the way we offer our online programs throughout the system. But it's good insight and we're aware of it. And that's why that our continuing ed arm is really trying to rethink the way that we deliver. And we had great success this year with our Google IT certification program, which is a partnership with Google. And we had a good enrollment in that program. Even our own students in our credit-bearing computer science degree was taking the certification program as sort of that added value. And that's where we see higher ed going in terms of people looking for some short-term certifications, then how do we kind of stack them into degree programs? So, yep, good observation and something we're watching and trying to respond in our own way. Yep.
Chris, I know in Salem, certainly the internet access, you talked about transportation being an issue. The internet access is absolutely crazy. And then you look at kids that are having hybrid high school, 2 on, 2 off. They're used to not being in school.
Yeah.
And to entice them back,
yeah,
it's going to take a lot of work.
Yep. And we're talking about, in some cases, maybe a gap in learning, a gap in a different world. How do we get them re-engaged? And, we've talked a little bit about, I know John's team is a little nervous because the environment that, to your point, Sue, is that, well, today I'm virtual, so I'm going to be virtual today. That's not how, we're going to be providing some flexibility for sure, but not quite like that. And so if you've had a year and a half of that sort of option, it's kind of like us going back to in-person work. Like I can't wear sweatpants every day. Like that's a bummer. And so, our students are going to have to make some adjustments too. And there's a lot of discussion around what are those seniors in high school going to need to recalibrate the way in which they've approached learning? And what do we want to learn from them, though, that we should be changing up to accommodate that? Because like I said earlier, not every student has failed in virtual learning. In fact, there are certain populations of students that have done very well in the virtual world. And John, what was the data we had that, just to maybe demonstrate even at Adirondack, we looked at our grades, and John, do you want to just share the success in that area?
Yeah, I wish I had pulled it up ahead of time so I could give the precise numbers, but actually our average grades during the pandemic were higher than the pre-pandemic average grades, not by 10 or 20 points, but by, a small percentage. And Chris and I were talking about that. A lot of it, I think, is due to the fact that we really gave a lot of extra support and care and services to students. And Brian was talking before, what lessons can we learn and how can we leverage this, whether there's a pandemic or not? And these are some of the good things, and Chris's graph showed before, all of these little things that we're doing are helping to promote those retention rates, graduation rates, and everything else that we're working on. So yeah, our average grades during the pandemic did go up a tick compared to pre-pandemic average grades.
And the fact that they didn't go down was, I mean, we were expecting that. I think even some faculty and, all of us were worried about what would happen with students, and we didn't see that. It was good.
So
It's interesting because to encourage the population that doesn't have internet access at home, the dormitories and ACC in Round Glens Falls does have that access.
Well, and that's why some students lived in the residence hall this year, is because that's where they could get access, and they knew that. And, even on campus, we've built what we've called little Zoom rooms, so that students that didn't have access at home could come on campus and actually participate in their class. And again, one of those things Anne Marie and I just were talking about, we've got to figure out how to keep some of those, because regardless, we're going to need to have people that can log on to a class maybe in between their in-person class.
So, yeah, so just a couple of high school stories I know about where the kids were, probably hanging out with the wrong crowd at certain times. Some of those kids have really excelled in school because they're home. They're not hanging out with people they shouldn't be. There's no peer pressure, no nothing. They're concentrating on their work, knowing that this is their last opportunity, especially when they're junior and seniors in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a big thing. I think a bigger issue is going to be, because we thought this even before the pandemic, is communications 101 here. How do we teach the student that this is when you call, this is when you show up, this is when you text? I mean, there's certain times that those social skills have really paid a price in this pandemic. And now it's going to be to a far more degree than we were seeing it before. And they have to know which thing they should be doing as far as in relationships with people they work with or work for.
Yep.
So I don't know how you're going to overcome that, but it's going to be a very big need in the very near future.
Well, and interesting, Brian, because I've heard faculty say the opposite, that even in a Zoom environment, it's hard to be, I mean, you can turn your camera off, and for some students, this has become much more comfortable than it would have been in a classroom. I mean, you're right there in front of your instructor. You can't sit in the back and, put your head down, like you're there. So we've also seen some more engagement, and even, faculty that have had the student before and now seen them in this environment. It's like, oh, Chris talked more this semester. So it's a mixed bag, like everything in the world, right? We're all humans and we experience things differently. And for all the challenges, and we don't want to diminish the trauma that many people have experienced in this last year and a half. On the flip side, again, acknowledging what has worked and how to make sure that we foster that environment as well. Great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here this afternoon.
Yeah, great.
Catching us all up.
That's all we have. And, we'll get Rob and Melissa connected, and we'll be in touch as our budget continues to evolve. And
thank you.
Happy to.
I hope everybody goes out and enjoys the spring day, right?
I know, it's beautiful out there. Yeah. And next year, we hope to see you back at trivia. Warren County got 3rd place this year.
Did they?
Yes.
It's because we didn't come.
Exactly. So we need you back next year.
It sounds like a good plan.
All right.
A great plan.
Good.
Does anyone have any more questions for anyone? So do we have a motion to adjourn? Thanks, Brian.
I think I'm on the committee.
You're good. Thank you. Second, say goodbye to everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye, thanks
Bye.
all.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.